Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody here. So I'm Dave Grancelli. I head up the Communications and Community Outreach Office at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. So we partner with Bob and all of his instructors and staff. At the Lincoln Laboratory, we're responsible for external communication at the lab, as well as many other STEM programs like a radar program. But I want to thank Bob and Lisa, Joel, and Scott,
expand,
TAs and
right?
the instructors,
And she
and
turned out to be
on another impactful summer here at BWSI. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Louie Lopez, the Director of Department of Defense STEM. So Mr. Lopez is responsible for the management, execution, and strategic direction of K through graduate STEM programs for the DoD. Mr. Lopez funds BeaverWorks and our radar workshop at Lincoln Laboratory and many other STEM programs. So prior to this position, Mr. Lopez served as the Chief of STEM Education and Outreach for the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command. And he served as a U.S. Marine Corps and has a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of California, San Diego, and a master's degree in educational technology from National University in San Diego. So Mr. Lopez is very interested in your projects today. He wants to hear more from you, and he's going to visit some of the classrooms. He'll also discuss some of the DoD SMART scholarships and other opportunities for students furthering their STEM careers. And so please welcome Louie Lopez. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me all right? So I haven't asked Bob and the rest of the folks here, but actually, first I'll say thanks to Bob, thanks to David, Lisa, and I believe Joel for inviting me to share a little bit about what we do in the Department of Defense, as well as what we do in this space, particularly in providing opportunities for students like yourselves. First, let me get a show of hands. How many of you guys, is this your, are you a returning BWSI student, or everyone here is new? Everyone here is new. Okay, all right, so that's great. So I work within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And our Undersecretary, who is a political appointed position, Miss Heidi Hsu, is responsible for leading all of the research and engineering enterprise across the Department of Defense. And that includes our MIT Lincoln Labs here at this institution. So I understand that you all couldn't use your cell phones while in camp, but I did ask Bob if you could just use it for at least the next half hour or so. So you're welcome. But I can't say anything beyond this talk because they might take that away from you again. Anyway, just to make this a little bit more interesting, if you could indulge me for a second, there's a QR code. There's also a URL here, menti.com. Enter the code here, and I'll be asking you some questions and some polls along the way for us to make this a little bit more interactive. Some of you may have already used this before in your classroom, especially during the pandemic. So these instructions you'll find again on every question or poll that I ask you. So I'll give it about a minute or two here, and then I'll move on to our first question. All right, while I'm waiting for folks to come on, and thank you, David, for the kind introduction. Just a little bit of background. You know, I've been doing STEM education and workforce development probably for a bit over 20 years. And I started in academia. I taught computer science courses right there at Cal State Fullerton in their engineering computer science. And then I worked at Cal State Fresno for a little bit, and also in their engineering computer science before I took on before I came to federal government, and I started with the Army managing their programs. I have to say, you know, while other folks might have better argument, I have the best job. I get to influence where we invest taxpayer dollars in programs like LL Rise and BWSI and many other programs across the country. Over the last few years, we've issued probably somewhere around 134 million in grants to institutions, to nonprofit organizations, to local educational agencies, to really invest in the future of our country's technical talent, such as yourselves. Okay, so I think we have enough folks here signed up, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the first question. How many of you all have heard of DoD STEM before? And some of you may have just heard of it today. Well, and I'll wait for a second here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the Department of Defense STEM programs. So you can still respond while I'm moving through the slides, but I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit what Department of Defense STEM. So really, this is our collective effort in building the nation's talent organically here within the U.S. Because we're vested in it. As mentioned before, I work for the Research and Engineering Enterprise in DoD, and across the department, in case you guys didn't know this, the Department of Defense is the largest employer of STEM professionals across the federal government. We probably have somewhere close to 300,000 STEM professionals, and about 65,000 of them work in our research laboratories and engineering centers that is across about 60 laboratories and centers across the country, spanning about 200 locations. And these programs also include some from the Army. The Army has their programs called Army Educational Outreach Programs, and they have programs also at the K through 12, as well as the undergraduate, master's, PhD, and postdoc. And similarly, the Navy and the Marine Corps have programs under Naval STEM. And then the Air Force and also now Space Force also have programs, and I know they're going through rebranding, but I think currently they're calling it Air and Space Force STEM. But aside from our military service branches and their labs and centers, we also have our other defense agencies that also require technical talent. I'm sure you've heard of National Security Agency, Missile Defense Agency, Defense Logistics Agency, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, just to name a few. So that's why we're committed in building the nation's technical talent, because we need a pipeline of talent to eventually come into our labs and centers and lead some of the challenging topics that our scientists and engineers continue to work on day in and day out, continue to innovate the likes of, challenges in biotechnology, microelectronics. So as I mentioned, some of these critical technology areas like microelectronics, directed energy, advanced materials, quantum information science, cyber, of course, is very important to the work in DoD, especially when it comes to defending our nation and also ensuring that our men and women in uniform have the technologies they need when we send them out to missions. Okay, so the National Defense Education Program, which I have the privilege of managing directly the execution of that program, is also the program that is able to fund efforts like the LL-RISE and BWSI. It is the largest investment that the Department of Defense is making when it comes to STEM education and workforce development, and mainly because of our SMART Scholarship Program. I'll talk about that a little bit. This past year, our appropriation for in-depth is about 168 million, and that's just one of the programs across the DoD. All right, so all of our programs you can find on our website, dodstem.us, and there's actually a way for you to search this by many filters, by grade levels, by the type of audience, by the type of programs that you're looking for, whether it's summer camps, competitions, or internships, and scholarships, and so on. And some of our, if you haven't already ventured into our website, there are actually some high school programs and high school competitions that students like yourselves could compete for national recognition and scholarships. One of them is the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium. Anyone have heard of JSHS before? Okay, so we've got a couple. So it's actually a research competition for high school students where they compete individually in any of the 8 STEM categories that we define, 4 in life science, 4 in the physical sciences. And if you win all the way up to national, you compete regional and national. I believe the total prize could be anywhere around 14 to 16,000 for first place. I think 8 to 9,000 for second place, and about 4 to 5,000 for third place, and that's in of course scholarship funds. So anyway, check us out on dodstem.us. All of our programs are on there, and you could also search it by map by state. All right. So next question: how many of you plan to pursue internships?
Mr. Lopez, we actually have a couple online questions too, if you would like to answer them while we're taking this poll.
Okay.
Michael McGivern asked, he's an instructor for one of our courses, our Back to Basics courses. Some of our students have developed pitches for developing new STEM outreach programs. Is there any way we can share those proposals with you?
Sure, and we actually have a process. So let me see if I got you right. Some of their students have developed STEM outreach programs, and they wanted to pitch those concepts to us. So there's actually a way. I don't have the number, the solicitation number memorized, but if the general public can go to grants.gov, and we have, and I don't have it on the slide here, but if you go to grants.gov and just search National Defense Education Program, we actually have an open solicitation. This current cycle is already done, but future cycles depend on FY24 appropriations, where we would be able to fund STEM education outreach and workforce development efforts that folks would submit solicitation and proposals. So hopefully that answered the question. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
So overwhelmingly, it looks like mostly every one of you are either thinking about or planning to pursue internships. So within the Department of Defense, one of the programs that we have, especially at the high school, undergraduate, master's, PhD, and postdoc, are internships, apprenticeships, scholarship, and fellowships. So probably these numbers were around COVID times when I said annually DoD was about 2,000 interns across all of our labs, centers, and our academic partners. But really, we're probably upwards closer before the pandemic, closer to 5,000 students who intern in DoD. And all of our internships and fellowships and apprenticeships are all paid. And you get to work alongside our DoD scientists and engineers doing some amazing research or engineering at one of our sites. So I just gave you a snapshot here of some of the programs. I'm not going to go through each one of them because you'll be able to find them on dodstem.us. But like I said, we have internship opportunities at high school, undergrad, and graduate. Most of them would give you work experience training. Some of them will already start processing your security clearance, because for some of our interns, you have to have some interim clearance to be able to access our physical space, research laboratories, and engineering centers. So again, for those of you planning to pursue internship, I do hope that you look over what DoD STEM has to offer, and hopefully one of them interests you somewhere local to where you're at. Okay, so since a good number of you are planning to pursue internship, I have these questions. You rank it from 1 to 5. Wanted to know what matters most to you when you're considering internships. Is it the experience? Is it the mentorship that you're going to get? Is it the pay? Or is it the research topic and, rate that from 1 to 5? Or the location, organization who would be offering you that internship? Or last here would be getting a job afterwards. So this is always a great way for us to find out what students such as yourselves are looking for when it comes to internships, especially as you start thinking about post-secondary education and experience.
Mr. Lopez, we have a student online who was wondering if citizenship matters for the application to those programs that you just showed.
So great question. Almost all of our internship and scholarship do require U.S. citizenship. And I think you all could understand why, because most of our scientists and engineers that work in our labs do have to have security clearance, anywhere from secret clearance all the way up to top secret and SCI. So I hope, was there another question? Okay. All right, so thank you for giving us your feedback. Looks like certainly experience came out as on top, as well as mentorship. Certainly the experience, I hope, will give you an outlook of what a future career looks like in that particular internship. All right, so next question. And Bob and David, please tell me if I'm going over. But have you heard of the DoD Smart Scholarship before? And I have a couple of slides that I'll dive into this just a little bit more. But the DoD Smart Scholarship is our largest investment within the Department of Defense. This past year alone, under in-depth, the appropriation for SMART was somewhere around 100 and, okay, maybe a little bit off, but somewhere around 120 million, 125 million, because this scholarship is one of the ways in which we attract talent into DoD to work again in some of the most challenging technological topics that our scientists and engineers are working on day in and day out. All right, so let me dive a little bit into SMART. So SMART actually stands for Science, Mathematics, and Research for Transformation. And what this is really providing students an opportunity to compete for these scholarships, in which we pay for your full tuition at the college of your choice. And by the way, we also give you a living allowance stipend anywhere from $30,000 to $46,000, broken down monthly over the year, just for you to be a student. And also over the summer, you get a research internship opportunity, usually 10 to 12 weeks at the sponsoring research lab or center. And the catch would be is that, and I don't really consider it a catch, after you graduate from your bachelor's, master's, or PhD, you have a guaranteed job as a civilian scientist or engineer at one of our labs or centers. And the requirement would be for however many years you got the scholarship, and you can have up to 5 years. If you only got awarded 3 years for the scholarship, then after you graduate from your degree, you would have to work as a civilian scientist or engineer at one of our labs for 3 years. So it's a one-for-one service requirement, but I always consider this a win-win. All of your college expenses are paid for. They pay you to go to school. You get an internship experience. And by the way, at the end of that, you get a guaranteed job. All right, so, and I believe I have another one here, just a little bit more. I already talked about these. Again, the careers, some eligibility and program requirements. Let me see. One thing I forgot, the application just opened a couple of days ago, and it closes December 1st. And this year, this is new because usually students wouldn't be able to apply until after a year in college. But now we've opened this up to rising freshmen. So if you're a senior graduating from high school, you could compete for this for next year, and then you'd be able to have all of your bachelor's degree expenses paid for. So again, eligibility requirements, we've already addressed this question about being a US citizen, GPA requirements. And then of course, when you are awarded a SMART scholarship, we automatically start processing your security clearance, because the summer after your first year of SMART scholarship, you would already be going into the research lab, DoD research lab or engineering center, conducting your internship with your SMART Scholar sponsor. Okay, so I'll pause here for a second and see if we have any questions about SMART.
We have one question from online from Smart Ishan Patel wants to know if there are major restrictions for what kind of scholarships SMART gives out.
Oh, great question. So we offer scholarships to students pursuing any of the 24, it's now 24 STEM disciplines. So if you go to smartscholarship.org and if you go to eligibility requirements and you look at STEM degrees, it will list all of those degrees that we award. So there's a question up here, and I think they've got a mic. So
how big is the acceptance rate?
acceptance rate?
Yeah.
Okay, to give you an idea, I believe this past year we probably had somewhere close 32 to 3,300 applications, and we awarded about 470. But the last couple of years has been like the first time that we've had large cohorts. Before that, we only awarded probably annually anywhere from 200 to 250 new scholars. As you can imagine, even though the appropriation for this and the funding is high, because it's a multi-year investment in a student's degree, right? So future cohorts is determined by how many scholars are still pursuing their degrees, because we're still paying for their tuition, for their expenses, and so on. But every year over the next 5 years, we'll probably be looking somewhere around 500 scholars every year. So I hope that answered your question. Okay.
If you were to double major and one of them fits in the category and the other doesn't, would that work?
Yes, that would be acceptable. I think certainly there's been some instances where that has happened before. Ultimately, and to give you guys a little bit of a background, and this is on the program website, when we award scholarship, the folks that are selecting the scholars are actually the labs or centers. We manage the program centrally from our office, and with collaboration from academic institution and nonprofit organization. But the selection of the scholars happen at the lab. And the reason why is for them, it's a hiring decision. It's just that you won't really enter the workforce until 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. So hopefully that answered your question and more. Okay.
The job afterwards, will we get to choose where we work or what project we work on?
Great question. I think it varies. And I think it's something that we're trying to work with the sponsoring facility, right? But here's one thing that you could do when you're applying. So when you're applying and you know the kind of work that you want to get into, like let's say you're doing computer science and you want to do software development, right? So we have a couple of organizations across DoD that do software development. So it would be to your advantage when you are researching the different organizations in DoD that might have the technical core competencies that you're interested in, so that when you apply for SMART, you have to state which sites are your preference. You want to say, hey, I want to go to Army Research Lab in Adelphi. Hey, I want to go to Naval Surface Warfare Center down in Point Loma, San Diego, California, or I want to go to Crane, Indiana, and so on. So we always tell the future applicants, do some research, do some matching about your interest and where that lies across the DoD research and engineering enterprise. I believe there's a question over here.
So I just had a question about the job that comes after. So if you're committing to a job for however many years after college, are there any guarantees about the payment?
Yes, of course. When you become a civilian scientist or engineer for DoD, it's a paid job, and it varies at different labs at what level they start you. But usually, a lot of our smart scholars, when we did a study, move up the rank pretty quickly, because throughout your scholarship experience, especially in the phase that you're pursuing your academic degree, you're already being acclimated to the team that you're eventually going to be plugged into when you become a civilian. That's your internship over the summer. You're already going to be doing some research and engineering with those folks, and especially with your mentors. So yeah, it's a paid job right after. And after you meet your job requirement, it's up to you if you want to stay beyond your phase 2. Certainly, if you're hired as a permanent civilian, you can stay as long as you want, or you can move around DoD. Right now, our retention rate is somewhere around 70%. Some of our smart scholars have jumped to industry and worked for industry, and then some have come back from industry and have led some big projects within the Department of Defense.
Louie, just one question. The application states that you have to be 18 to apply, but since you just opened it up to rising seniors, a lot of them are not 18.
Yes, that's a great question, and hopefully there's a better explanation in there, because don't quote me on my response. I might have to get back to that particular question, because some high school graduating seniors are not of 18 yet. Of course, the requirement of 18 is, again, the security clearance, the access to the labs, and so on. They can apply. Correct. Because the cycle takes a long time, right? So the application opens this August, closes in December, and we go through reviews of all the applications in the spring. We go through multiple layer of reviews and eventually have our first notification of awards around late April or May. And then they really won't start their scholarship until the following academic year, right? And our scholars, even before they fully accept the scholarship, if they're offered, will also have an opportunity to visit the site. We actually pay for your travel expenses to visit the site, because, what if you have multiple scholarship offer and you want to first make sure that site that you have a particular match in topic of interest is where you want to spend 2-3 years after you graduate. So anyway, we provide that too, and we have some scholars that have made the travel and have actually declined our scholarship, and that's fine. We actually want to find that out early on as opposed to later. Okay. Yes, the latter. So you can apply now while you're 17, but when your scholarship starts, you would have to be of age, because that's when we start your security
like 4
clearance.
months at the college and then you turn 18. Like I turned 18 like 4 months after college.
I don't have an answer for you, but I'll find out. Hey, that's a great question. So what if the Smart Scholarship paid for your bachelor's? Let's say a couple years of your bachelor's, because we do have this instance in numerous instances. We also have part of the Smart Scholar also awards scholarships to our current workforce who compete for the scholarship get accepted at one of the colleges to pursue their master's or PhD.
Oh, and then would they have to work like back again at the company for like how many years they study for their PhD?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's just say, so let's just say 2 years in, you got 2 years eligibility, right? On your second year, you applied because it takes about a year cycle, right? In second year, you applied. You have 3 more years left of eligibility in SMART because you have 5 total. And you use that 3 years to pursue your PhD, then you would be on the hook for at least 3 more years working at the lab. For most of our folks that do that, those 3 years go by really quick because most of the things that you're going to do as part of your PhD and your dissertation, all that is probably tied to the research that you're doing at that DoD lab. But when you're already an employee within DoD, we also have other programs that pay for your master's and PhD, not just SMART. Okay, I know I knew I'd get a lot of questions about this, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time here. I got a couple more slides to wrap up for you guys. And certainly, if any questions that come after, I'd be happy to answer afterwards. All right, so I think this probably correlates to the internship question. How many of you plan to pursue STEM degrees or careers? I won't take as much time here. I just wanted to get an idea from the folks from this program, and it looks like a good majority of you are looking at STEM degrees or careers. All right, you can still respond while I click through the next slide because I'm afraid I might be running out of time. But the reason why I wanted to bring up that question is also on our DoDSTEM.us website. We have a few subpages that go into STEM career exploration. So you go to any topics, whether it's biology, engineering, computer science, cyber related careers, space related careers, and so on. What we've done is we've provided a way for you to explore what those careers look like within DoD, as well as provided you a menu of options. So like, let's say you select cyber or computer science. Oh, it just matched. Okay, so cyber or computer science, then what we would, on that search, would give you some, a menu of educational opportunities that you can pursue also within DoD, as well as some testimonials from our computer scientists or engineers in that field working on some DoD problems. All right, so I think that was my last slide. If you don't already follow us, here are our social media handles. This is where we provide a lot of our announcements to the general public. And if I have more time, I'd be happy to take any more questions. But with that, I appreciate your time. And hopefully this has been informative for all of you. So Dr. Chin, do we have time for questions or are we out? Oh, okay. And certainly I can close it if no more questions, but happy to entertain questions that you may have.
For the summer internships, you said that you need a security clearance. Does that also require you to be 18?
Well, for the summer internships, there are some that don't require you to have access to sites that may require the interim clearance. While we have high school interns at our labs, it's mostly at those places that's not going to require you to have physical access to classified information.
Does it maybe? Does it maybe?
Yes. It really depends on the site where you're applying an internship. And again, if you go to DoDSTEM.us and select the different programs, it will tell you where those internship opportunities are, and it will also tell you what their technical competencies are. Like for instance, what are you interested in? What are you planning to major? Computer science. Well, computer science is really portable and across all of our topics, right? Because you're always going to need computer scientists. And actually, I didn't mention this earlier, for SMART scholarship, the top degree, when it comes, the top 4 degrees, the first one is computer science, electrical engineering. Second one is, or computer science, computer engineering. I think second one is electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and then the fourth is aerospace engineering. Okay, any other questions?
Hi, this isn't about the scholarship, but just in general, what does a engineering or science job at the Department of Defense tend to look like? Yeah, I was curious.
Well, that could go in many different ways, because there's never really a one set, right? A computer scientist could be working in developing software that could be, and I'll just take an example. Could be developing software that could be used in multiple platforms that, whether it's on a ground vehicle system, or it could be an underwater unmanned vehicle, or it could be on an airplane or something like that. Or a computer scientist could be focused on cybersecurity, ensuring that our men and women in uniform are able to operate in a safe space, especially when they're in theater. When we say theater, it's usually when we send them in missions in foreign countries where they could be, the operational space could be easily, what's the right word? Attacked. But to your point, there's really no, there's really no set, this is how it goes, because it always varies. Our scientists and engineers could be doing fundamental basic science research, or they could be leading projects or contracts, working with academic institutions, working with industry to come at these different challenges that the DoD has. Oh yes, absolutely, because he's one of our partners.
So you can imagine the Department of Defense requires all the disciplines that sort of is that you are learning, right? And with some of them, the DoD is leading, and they do the initial investment, initial discoveries, and eventually makes it into the civilian side. Nowadays, a lot of technologies are being pushed in the civilian sector, and then they're imported back to the defense sector, right? So to be the research scientist in the DoD community, one, you have to know what's going on around the world, right, in the civilian side as well. And second, you have a very unique problem. I think Dr. Eric Evans mentioned, what is acceptable in the civilian sector, performance-wise, may not be acceptable in the defense applications, kind of a performance requirements in terms of false alarms. So there is a very unique research that's required to really apply these technologies for the DoD problems. And those are done by DoD scientists and engineers.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great insight, because a lot more emphasis is placed now in us trying to look at what are some available emerging technologies out there that we can work with, as opposed to having to organically build that from the beginning. Because we're mindful these are taxpayer dollars, and we want to make sure that we're as efficient in getting at what we need. All right, question over there.
Yeah, you said you took high school interns, and I was wondering where I could find that.
So again, DoDSTEM.us. If you look at explore opportunities, and you filter it by internships, and you're a high school student, and it should list all the different opportunities for you. The Army has high school internship program. I think the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force all do. National Security Agency, I believe they also have it, and a few others. And then, of course, it'll depend on. I would like to think that almost every state there's an opportunity, but of course, some states are big enough. It might not be in your local area, but interestingly enough, some students have come a long way to do just an internship, like let's say in the DC area with the Naval Research Laboratory or Army Research Laboratory, just to get that experience. Because as you can imagine, that also goes really well in your college application packets.
We have a question that maybe you can answer really well. We have somebody who is considering going into the Marines, but they're worried will affect their future career if they do military first.
You know, right out of high school, I have to tell you, the last thing I wanted to do was military. I'm sure for most of you who are now juniors or seniors, you're probably getting all these phone calls or mails that saying, hey, you know, check us out. And I kept saying no. Just a little bit as a personal story. I did a lot in high school, and that really burnt me out. I played in a few sports. I was in student government, and of course I also worked and did a lot of community service. And so when I started my first quarter in college, I was just burnt out, and I needed to see, okay, what can I do in the meantime? And I wouldn't recommend this, but this is what I did. And hindsight is always 20/20. I wish I would have done more research before actually jumping in. But after my first quarter, I just went to a recruiting station. Most of my family are in the Navy, and they were all, when I told them I was thinking about going to the Navy, my uncles, my older brother, they said, oh, go in the Navy, it'll be easy. You'll just be somewhere in the ship for 6 or 8 months out of the year. But you know, having played sports, I also wanted to challenge myself physically, and I thought, okay, which of the branches would give me that challenge? And I thought the Marine Corps would do that for me. If I had to do it all over again, I would have probably gone to Air Force, because it probably fit my interest more in math and computer science. But I went to Marine Corps, and I don't regret that I've gone that route. Will it affect your future outlook? Absolutely not. My experience in the Marine Corps has opened many opportunities after my service in uniform. And a lot of our DoD scientists and engineers have also served in uniform.
What about a student's application makes them really stand out so that they fit within your criteria?
You're talking about the SMART scholarship?
Yeah.
Again, it varies, right? And if you take a look at what's required in the application, and I'm sure much like the other scholarships that you all are looking for, you know, you really want to see a well-rounded student, and you really want to see, you know, some of the things that we've asked in the past, and it's still is part of the application. Much like your college admission and other scholarships, you have to write an essay, right? And that tells a lot about yourself. And in years past, we've also asked for letters of recommendations from one of your professors in college and so on. But this year is the first year we've actually changed that letters of recommendation. This year is the first year that we've actually, instead of a letter of recommendation, because sometimes it takes a while for you to establish those relationships with your professors, we're really looking for feedback from many folks in your life, whether it's your high school teacher, whether it's your college professor, whether it's your athletic coach in whatever sports that you're in, to give us a little bit of an idea of what your motivation is like, what your skills is like, what's your, you know, problem solving skills, initiative, and so on. So that's something that's new this year. I don't know if I answered your question, because that also varies in how the labs select, because it's a decentralized selection. As you can imagine, different labs or centers could have different priorities. I mean, different ways in which they prioritize their awards, but everything that's part of that SMART scholarship application is what they're looking at from an applicant.
Louis, question from online. Do you have to be a freshman in college to apply for the scholarship? Could somebody apply as a sophomore or a junior? Or
Oh,
senior?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You could apply as a senior. And let's say you're a graduating senior in college and you just got accepted to a PhD program or a master's program. Also that fits this, the 24 STEM disciplines within SMART. You could apply. And actually, we've had instances where a student would apply and get awarded a scholarship, junior and senior in undergraduate, but they work it out with the lab or center that have selected them and say, hey, I'm really liking this topic that I started as an undergraduate, and I want to pursue a master's continuing this research. Would you guys honor giving me another 2-year of SMART scholarship if I do a joint bachelor's and master's? And we have instances where that has happened. Okay.
I have one more. Can somebody be a permanent resident to apply?
I believe it's a U.S. citizen is a requirement. And I understand permanent residence has a pathway to citizenship, but U.S. citizenship currently is a requirement.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Lopez. We have 2 students from our race car course here that would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and presenting to us. I think your talk was really engaging, and I really liked the polls you did. It kept us engaged.
Thank you so much for the talk. It was really amazing to hear all of the opportunities across all of the education levels and through like these brand new technologies. So we would like to present to you this VivaWorks shirt.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.